Oké, kom eraan.
Nou, welkom bij de Nieuwe Universiteit van Waarden en de seminar over de mission statement van deze herborene universiteit. De Nieuwe Universiteit van Waarden, de Johan Cruyff Revolution gaan we ontketenen. Met het nieuwe beschavingsbegrip, de sociale organica.
Alsjeblieft.
Ja, oké. Laten we gaan.
Nederlands geen match.
Zet er maar even uit tot we gaan beginnen.
Ja.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. At the first get-together of the University of Value, let me put the mic in a proper position. The next 60 minutes we will have a presentation by Mr. Kelder, who will talk about social organics. And first of all, to start off, I will read the mission statement of the new University of Values. It's the first time, so that's why a mission statement is appropriate at mine. That's what I think at least. So here we go. The new University of Values in Amsterdam envisions a Johan Cruyff Revolution in education. Hereby, management no longer plays a leading role in the decision-making process, but only fulfills a facilitating one. The creative spirit of teachers as social artists and pure scientists must be proportionally represented in this process. We recognize the existing of two extreme mental attitudes, whereby non-quantifiable creativity and impulses represent one end, and one-sided materialistic profit thinking the other end of the spectrum. For you will speak Johan Kelder. He was born in The Hague in Holland in 1939. Kelder is a publisher, translator and founding director of the Wilhelm Institute for Anthroposophy and Social Organics in Switzerland in 1985, which moved to Amsterdam in 1986. After studying in all three undergraduate facilities of the McGill University of Montreal for 7 years, he graduated in 1965 with a bachelor degree of music composition and a minor in philosophy. As an editor of the underground Montreal newspaper Logos, he took part in the occupation of the administration center of the McGill University in the struggle for free speech around the same time that the Maagdenhuis was first occupied here. At the end of the 60s, he embarked on a career as a singer-songwriter in the United States and attended the famous Woodstock Festival in upstate New York. Kelder had been searching all this time in vain for viable alternatives to the growing crisis situation of mankind on Earth until he came in contact in Los Angeles in 1971 with anthroposophy and its social component. Social organics, developed by the Australian philosopher and visionary Rudolf Steiner. In order to engross himself in this matter, he moved to Switzerland in 1973, where he studied and worked together with, among others, the German philosopher Herbert who at that time was head of the social science section of the School of Spiritual Science. The School of Spiritual Science, thus here we go again. Das Goetheanum, named after the German poet-writer Johann Goethe. This school for higher learning was founded by Rudolf Steiner in 1923 as a research and development center of the General Anthroposophical Society, of which Kelder has been a long-time member. So please give him a warm welcome. Here's Mr. Kelder.
Yeah.
Thank you, Niels. Well, you'll probably wonder, what is the meaning of all this? Johan Cruyff Revolution in education, a new principle of civilization, social organics. So before I read the manifest, Christ is an alternative, I want to just say a few words about this idea of the Johan Cruyff Revolution, how we came to this idea. You may remember that a few years ago, at a meeting of the directors of Ajax in Amsterdam, Johan Cruyff presented his revolutionary idea about the relationship between management and artists and scientists, people who really know what they're doing. And he said, at the direction in Ajax, the football players, the people that really know something about football, are on the bottom, and at the top are the directors. People that don't really have any idea about football. And his idea was that the relationship between the directors, the managers, on the one hand, and the real people who know something, the professionals, should be turned around like a revolution. The managers and the directors should only facilitate that which the really creative people can think and can carry out. And that is actually the same basic problem here in this university, as in all universities, as in all institutions in the Netherlands, but also in all of Europe and also America. There's really no basic difference. That the managers, the people who are not really creative in that they don't come up with any new ideas, are in power, and what we need is now not so, again, a repetition of the slogan of the 60s, the 70s, imagination and power, power to the imagination, power to the virtues. This is a political party that I started in connection with a exhibition of the virtues in the Amsterdam City Hall 2 years ago. And also I mentioned this in my first workshop up there at the No Press Room, when I defended the thesis that the just prices in the world economy are the virtues of the world economy. Okay, that is a sort of introduction to this manifest, which I'm going to read now. This manifest was written by the one that Niels mentioned, Herbert who was a philosopher and anthroposophist, but also an industrialist, someone who had, at the top of a firm, had extensive economic knowledge of financial things. And he wrote this text, Crisis and Alternative, some years back for a standing conference he had organized annually called Contributions to the World Situation. That took place every fall. And in one of these conferences, he wrote this text, which was then published in the Basler Zeitung in Switzerland, the main daily newspaper in Basel, and it was first published and mentioned here in Holland, in the Netherlands, in 1990 in Den Bosch, where I organized a conference, social science conference, under the title Anthroposophy and the Science or Art of Social Renewal. The subtitle of this manifest is called Meaningful Law and Law-Giving Meaning in the Social Organics of Rudolf Steiner. It is a very condensed, seminal text, and I have copies of it here lying that you can get. I have also a copy in Dutch. It's also been put on the internet. And you probably will not understand everything at the same time. But if you like, you can follow it from the text. Okay, here we go. The crisis of present-day mankind is just as often headlined as it is whitewashed. For on the one hand, only those unable to read the signs of the times can remain oblivious to the current social, political, and economic tensions and threats. On the other hand, spokesmen in both West and East, while simultaneously rejecting each other, shower their own systems with the highest of praise. Granted, there is a strong undercurrent of feeling that the things just glorified as great achievements and conquests present on the inside quite a different picture. Real insight into this critical state of affairs, however, is largely wanting. From this general sense of wrong and uncertainty springs the constantly growing desire and demand for alternatives, surging more and more uncontrollably into the foreground. It is therefore one of the most urgent and inevitable demands of our times to penetrate through the surface manifestations to the source of the current crisis. Yet, this bottom line is suppressed. Most people, no matter where they stand, are not really willing to admit it. The quantity principle is the strong thrust propelling the social and economic distributions of goods and services. The resultant changes are the greatest events of our time. From their storm-lashed waves, a new mankind disembarks onto the shore, partly guided, partly propagated by an innate energy rendered autonomous. This procession, slowly and stealthily moving forward, even during a calm, drags everything else with it or brutally shoves it aside. That it is indeed the quantity principle taking effect in such a violent and insidious manner becomes most obvious when one focuses on the two most powerful levers in our world. The operators of the first lever, believed to be stronger than all opposition, and by the others, doubt as to their viability is growing. One of these levers is the distribution of the gross national product, GNP. The grip operating them is the concept of amount, i.e. power. To allocate the right amount of value arising out of the labor process to the right recipients is the power ascribed to one of these levers. To arrive at the most equitable decisions through the would-be participation of all concerned, in truth, through the prevailing of that body of opinion which has the most clout. You know that word clout? It's a sort of slang for power, clout. It's used in, I think in boxing also. Somebody who has a lot of clout means a strong person. Yeah. That is, in other words, I'll read that sentence again. To arrive at the most equitable means just and right decisions through the would-be participation of all concerned, in truth, through the prevailing of that body of opinion which has the most clout, is the power ascribed to the other lever. In one case, it is a matter of wage earning. In the other, it is majority rule. Both are quantity principles and quantity criteria.
within both of these effective features of contemporary life, that which they aim to overcome and believe to be getting rid of continues to exist. Only the means and ways are different by which their new champions gain their powers and the foundations and utilization thereof. It is, after all, a question of the possession of supply of demand and influence. And now comes a very important sentence. The root of the crises is the continuation of the bourgeois mentality concerning possession, which only provided satisfaction through its affinity with old cultural instincts. Where this supplement falls away, the felt, if not fully understood, frustration on the part of those parading their desires under other pretexts spreads. That is an explanation for all these various protest movements who are protesting instead of attesting. They are against something, but as far as new alternatives, new ideas, what should come in place of their desires, very often they are there not able to really answer that question. Because the crisis is very deep. And this is an attempt to really get to the bottom of this crisis. From this stage, these protests, ensues the growing inflation of claims and demands that forces its way into all branches of social and economic life. Now, diagnosis, analysis, does not bring the crisis under control. Although clear-sightedness in discerning the issues at stake cannot be dispensed with. Rudolf Steiner's social science is a real positive alternative which does not exhaust itself in demands and detailed improvements while retaining the underlying habits of thought. It postulates instead of the quantity principle, the function principle. Instead of the creation of ownership, the development of abilities, and the legal sphere of rights, instead of the executive order, productive order. And with that, an alternative of a most radical and encompassing kind is characterized. A most radical and encompassing kind of alternative is characterized. Now, that first part of the manifest was a diagnosis, the analysis of the present situation and why it happens and what are the undercurrents. Now comes the second part of this manifest, which is entitled The Radical Alternative. The original idea, which can only be hinted at here, runs as follows. Now comes the alternative, the solution to our problems. And you think people would be interested in someone standing here saying, I have the solution to the problems. But people are riding there, drinking coffee, and of course it's their freedom to do that, because this film will hopefully be put on YouTube, and we can refer to that. This is more or less a film, filming of a that is the main actual purpose of this. And perhaps people will then give it some attention. Now here again is the original solution. Ladies and gentlemen, here comes the real solution to all our problems.
Yeah!
The creation of right, justice, must be achieved within the creation of value as one of its functions. The right that decrees must be transformed into a right that is productive. So here I am standing in the new University of Value and putting forward a new creation of value inside the economy. A right that is not executive, that is not usually understood under a right or a law decrees. But this is a law completely unique and non-existing, except in our consciousness. Law which is productive, economically productive, and that is completely unique. No one in this hall and anywhere in the world who has not read this can come up with a right or a law which is economically productive. That this is possible, and that thereby completely new social expectations and willingness will be engendered, becomes clear the moment one considers the activity that creates economic value. And what creates economic value is human labor. That is what creates human value, economically speaking. Now the latter, labor, is composed of two functional currents. Qualifying labor, so-called manual labor, i.e. work that is applied directly or with the use of tools and machines to our natural resources. And on the other hand, organizing labor, so-called head work. Scientific and artistic work is also of an organizing nature, because all work directed towards human achievements and performance is primarily of an organizing nature. Okay? So here we have a representation of a twofold form of labor. Labor, on the one hand, applied to natural resources, and the other one is labor applied in the sense of intelligence to the labor process itself, which then results in division of labor. And that qualifies our present world economy, that we have worldwide division of labor and worldwide streams of capital. That is since the beginning of the 20th century, the end of the 19th century, the case in the world, that we have a change from national economies to world economy, but we lack a science of world economy, or art or science. Niels says that he believes that the economy is an art, which maybe it is. But in either is it has two aspects. There's a theoretical and a practical aspect. Okay, now, to continue this difficult exercise, the constantly occurring interaction between these two functional currents results in the formations of price formation. Just prices, that means such prices that do not falsify the value produced by one functional type of labor to the disadvantage of the other type, are only brought about, however, when the value-creating currents are guided along the lines of a balanced price formation by planning bodies. These planning bodies, to create just prices, can be nothing more than advisory boards or associations in which people active in the whole spectrum of social and economic life, and therefore competent, come together. For by means of the steering and equalization of the value-creating currents, just prices are generated, resulting therefore also in an equitable distribution of the GNP, the gross national product, on the basis of its genetic conditions. In other words, the genetic conditions of the gross national products are these two value-creating currents. The labor applied to nature is one value-creating current, and intelligence applied to the labor is another value-creating currents. And these two currents form prices. And if you want to have just prices, you cannot leave this process, as Adam Smith said, to the invisible hand. The invisible hand will result in prices, but these prices are not just. And justness of price is one of the values that this University of Values wants to come up for. That's why we're sitting here. We want to create new values, especially within the economy, which is our greatest problem. Okay. Not personal advantage and profit are the inner consequences of true insight into the living conditions of the social organism. Not personal advantage and profit are the inner consequences of true insight into the living conditions of the social organism. This refers to our mission statement, in which we concluded that this profit thinking, this thinking in rendementen in Dutch, has gained the upper hand, and the consciousness stream of the teachers, the doctors, the professionals in the field do not have the say enough in working out that which they want to create. A situation that Pim Fortuyn already put his finger on. In other words, the doctors, the teachers should again have the upper hand in the school, in the institutions. And it will not be personal advantage or profit if you have a real insight into this social organism. On the contrary, the applications of skills and abilities enhanced by being exercised to the social organism is the motive force of an economic life permeated by productive legal development and effect. Now we come to the climax. An inner economic value-creating right is a radical alternative that Rudolf Steiner's social science pits against the critical disorders of our times. It supersedes the quantity principle by the function principle and does not lead to the overcoming of the desire for possession through moral imperatives, in other words, executive right, which issues decrees at moral impairments, but by raising the social, organic, functional context into consciousness, into conscious awareness. In other words, it is a conscious raising process that is described here. An extremely unique and necessary task for a university. And now this sentence: in this new creation of right, of justice, all problems besetting and oppressing us are drawn together as in a matrix of cumulative solution.
Oh, God.
Okay, quite a statement. In this creation of right, this new productive right, all problems besetting and oppressing us are drawn together as in a matrix of cumulative solution, a nodal point. To be sure, the new paradigm that follows from overcoming the quantitative habits of thought, their expectations and claims, requires the supporting background of a meaningful worldview in which the psychic spiritual dimension of the human being finds a harbor. The new legal development that is here merely hinted at can only then be realized when at the same time it can install new dimensions of meaning, context. Mankind longs for true justice, but this must be a mirror in which it can recognize itself. Now this was the end of the working paper that Herbert Witzeman wrote for this conference in Switzerland. But for the publication in the Basel Zeitung, he added an extra paragraph. And that extra paragraph reads as follows. It's just as true then as it is today. Every attempt to draw a mental picture that relies on bringing the positive, devotional powers of the human being to bear within a broad spectrum of mankind is today considered to be starry-eyed utopian. But still, should not the experience we undergo with Western non-stop gratification, 24 hours social media, 24 hours non-stop music, non-stop gratification, should not the experience we undergo with Western non-stop gratifications of all desire and Eastern repression of all non-conformity serve as a warning to us, reminding us of the task of the European Middle Europe. And actually, the Netherlands is still part of Middle Europe. Actually, the division is the Rhine. Could it be true that the image of man and its corresponding image of social life, so deeply ingrained within our being, has vanished from our consciousness? This image of man that does not point the way to matter and collective, but to spirit and freedom. End of the manifest.
Okay. Right.
So.
Thank you. Ja, die komt aan het einde.
Maar ik wil aan het eind. Sorry.
Yeah. We have till 4 o'clock or a little bit later because we started 10 or 15 minutes later. I just want to say a few words about how this first of 3 seminars which we have in the planning stage could continue. As you heard in this manifest, all the problems in the world, especially in the world economy, come together in the question of just price. The whole globalization today, which has so many pros and cons, people are for, people are against globalization, it stands and falls with the formation of just price. Just price means that nobody is exploited anymore. That the people, these poor women in Bangladesh that live and work in deplorable houses that fall into pieces because they are not paid enough and their products are too cheap. That should be corrected. Now, so this question of just price is the cardinal issue of the world economy. And you hear the just price is an element of justice in it. In other words, a value of justice. As I said, just prices do not arise from the invisible hand of Adam Smith. It's a complete illusion. Now, my, how do you say, aanbod, how do you say aanbod in English? What is aanbod?
Opposition.
Yeah?
Opposition.
Aanbod.
Aanbod.
Offer.
My offer is to start a seminar, but not in this big hall, but in upstairs in the no press room, a seminar in which we deal with this booklet by Herbert Witzeman, the writer of this manifest, entitled The Just Price, World Economy as Social Organics, which I have translated also into.
Show.
Here you have
Show it.
the Dutch version, but I have an English version, which I can give the PDF file to the would-be participants, And this booklet on the just price is an introduction by Herbert Witzman, this industrialist, to this course that Rudolf Steiner gave on the world economy in 1922 in Switzerland for students of economy. It's a course on 16 lectures and 6 seminars in which he presents the basis of a new science of world economy, which we still don't have. And my proposition is that we first have a seminar on this booklet, The Just Price, if there's interest, as an introduction to this course, and then as a sort of long-term affair, I'd say, a long-term, because it'll take a couple of weeks to get through this. Because don't kid yourself. If you come up here and stand with the goal, let's say, with the idea that you can present a new principle of civilization, you have to come with really new ideas, and it cannot be, by definition, very easy to grasp, because the present world situation is very complicated, and you need a heightened form of thinking. Well, you need actually also a question of consciousness raising. In other words, this context, this course is not only a course on economy, but also a course on organic thinking. It's actually a course on social organics. And the last thing I want to say about this concept of social organics is that it refers to the so-called social organism. And the social organism, if you ask, well, what is a social organism? Is economically viewed, economically thought, the whole earth. And that is why in this book, which is the third of the books that Herbert Witzman wrote and that I presented in the University of Amsterdam last year, it's called the New Economic Order, Rudolf Steiner's Social Organics. We have a picture here of the whole earth. And the whole earth is economically viewed, economically thought, the social organism. And as every organism, as our own organism, our physical organism, requires food and drink. We have to eat and drink 3 times a day, otherwise we die. Same thing with the social organism. And the production factors of the social organism are the 3 classic production factors of classical economics: nature, labor, and capital. And the whole question of price forming has to do with the interrelationship between these 3 production factors: nature, labor, and capital. And capital is actually nothing else than realized money, because money, in principle, arises when some businessman has a good idea, and he can exploit this idea, and then he can make profit. So, in theory, of course, the practice is somewhat different, because money can be created without actually real economic value. It's one of our big problems. So that's the concept of social organics. But social organics is not only applicable to the whole social organism as a world economy, but it is also universal in that it can be used as a basis for organizing institutions, universities, on a meso-social level. And that's another aspect which I cannot go into now, but as you may have realized, it's a new concept, difficult to grasp. Probably you will think, oh, what heaven's name is this? But there are these books, and there's an opportunity to go into it and delve into it. And if you're interested, you can write your name, and then maybe perhaps next week we can, up there, start a seminar on the just price. Okay, that was what I had to say. And now I give the word back to Niels and his film and his introduction. Thank you for your attention.
So, thank you, Mr. Kelder. The reason why I invited Mr. Kelder to this main hall is mainly because I recognize a lot of my parts into what he is saying. I will give a short introduction on why I am here and the reason why I can relate to this protest in this way. I see myself as the starry-eyed utopian Mr. Kelder just talked about, and I will show a short movie about what I'm doing basically.